Hello, I'm Lucy Hockings, live in the Qatari capital, Doha. It is day 42 of the US-Israel war with Iran, and over the next 25 minutes, we're going to bring you up to date with the latest from the region and diplomatic efforts to negotiate peace. So let's start with some of today's main developments. 6 weeks into the war, all eyes are on Pakistan, where Iran and the US are preparing for crucial peace talks. Iran's parliamentary speaker warns there will be no negotiations with the US until there's a ceasefire in Lebanon and Iranian assets are unfrozen. President Trump accuses Iran of extortion over the Strait of Hormuz, saying he won't accept a toll on ships passing through the vital waterway. This all comes as US inflation rises to its highest level in 2 years, with the price of oil impacting the wider global economy. We'll be live with our correspondents across the region and around the world as we analyse the global impact of the US-Israeli war with Iran. But first, with the prospect of peace hanging in the balance, the world is turning its attention to Islamabad, where teams from Iran and the US will try to negotiate an end to the war. But there are many obstacles that stand in the way, from a total absence of trust, a lack of common ground, and the fact that Israel, America's full partner in the war, has massively ramped up its military campaign in Lebanon. As we speak, US Vice President J.D. Vance is on his way to Pakistan as part of the US delegation alongside Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner. Let's take you to our correspondent Ione Wells, who is in Washington for us. Ione, what do we know about the approach of the US delegation going into these talks?
Well, I think all the rhetoric suggests it's going to be an incredibly hardline approach. Donald Trump has done what he has done previously in this conflict today, which is ramp up the threats and rhetoric towards Iran, essentially putting pressure on them to make concessions, do what the US would like. He has said that the only reason that Iranians are alive is to negotiate. He has also said that US warships in the region are being loaded up with some of the world's most powerful weapons and that they will essentially use them to greater force than previously in this conflict if a deal isn't reached. He said that we will know within the next 24 hours. I think that makes it pretty clear what the US's approach is going to be, which is, to quote what Pete Hegseth, the defense secretary, has said previously in this conflict, to negotiate with bombs, essentially say, if you don't do as we say, we are going to ramp up our military campaign against you. This all comes, of course, as there is growing frustration from the US's perspective about two key disagreements really in these talks. One is over whether or not this ceasefire applies to Lebanon. The US and Israel say it doesn't. Iran saying it does. And Israel, as you mentioned, has been ramping up its military bombardment of Lebanon, killing hundreds of people in the country in the last 24 hours. There is also this ongoing disagreement about the Strait of Hormuz, with Donald Trump getting increasingly frustrated about the fact that Iran still isn't letting all ships go through. There's only a limited amount of traffic, as far as we're aware, that is passing through the Strait of Hormuz at the moment, and still tolls being applied, we understand, as well to some of those vessels. Donald Trump says that it was the agreement that it would be fully open. So these two huge sticking points remain. And I think if those aren't sort of thrashed out in the next 24 hours, there is still a big question mark about whether these talks will even happen, given that Iran has also said it doesn't want to have them while there is still conflict going on in Lebanon, and they want also blocked assets of theirs to be released.
Ione, thanks so much for that. Straight to Islamabad now. We can join our Pakistan correspondent Caroline Davies, who is there for us, where the negotiations are due to begin to get underway on Saturday. Carrie, they've been getting ready there. I know you've been down to the security cordon in the red zone. But with these calls now from Iran's Speaker of the Parliament for a ceasefire and a release of frozen assets before the talks even take place, just how much does this really show that there's this huge gulf between the two sides?
I mean, we're not even at the point where the talks are starting, and we can already see that the huge hurdle of trying to get both sides here to the negotiating table to even agree on what they say that they already previously agreed in terms of a ceasefire. I think that shows that not only how far apart they are, but also shows that if they do get here, how much difficulty they may well be, or how much of a challenge it might be to try and find some common ground and try to find something that feels meaningful and can last. As you say, I've been down to the red zone, which is the area in Islamabad where the main majority of government buildings are, as well as foreign embassies, and that whole area has effectively been closed off with barbed wire, police, army, as well as the paramilitary Rangers force as well here in Islamabad. And that security cordon has seemed to grow throughout the course of the day. We were at one point quite close to the red zone in an area called Dichok, and we were then pushed further and further back down the road as we were told that delegations would be arriving soon. We don't know which delegations, and we don't know how soon. We do of course know that JD Vance is in the air, but those questions do still remain about the Iranian delegation. We did hear yesterday from the Iranian ambassador here, who had put out a post on social media saying that the Iranian delegation was going to be travelling last night. And so there was an enormous amount of speculation about this. That post was then deleted after less than an hour. And of course, we've had no official confirmation or no announcement about any Iranian delegation here yet. In Pakistan. So still an enormous amount of anticipation here. If you speak to a lot of the Pakistani authorities behind the scenes, there still seems to be a real positivity that these talks will happen. Everything is still continuing to sort of move forward in terms of their planning and their security measures. But the next question is, what is going to happen with Iran? Will we hear something further from the Iranian delegation?
Carrie, thanks so much for that. Well, let's delve into what we are hearing from inside Iran. Jia Gol is our correspondent from BBC Persian. He joins us now from the London newsroom. To remind you, BBC Persian, the Persian language service of BBC News. It's used by 24 million people around the world, the majority in Iran, despite being blocked and routinely jammed by the Iranian authorities. Jia, we've been talking with Ione and with Carrie as well about these demands that we've had from Iran's parliamentary speaker. Can you explain who he is, how influential he is, and whether we think he will actually be at these talks in Islamabad?
Well, Lucy, Mohammad Baqir Qalibaf is well known in Iran. He is one of the hardline conservative politician. He is a former member of Revolutionary Guard. He commanded, in fact, Iranian Revolutionary Guard aerospace. He was one of the pioneer of missile program in Iran, and also he was the mayor of capital city of Tehran, and now Speaker of the Parliament. I think today the deputy head of Iran's Parliament's national security and foreign policy, he said he has been appointed to lead the negotiation team by Supreme Leader of Iran, Mujtaba Khamenei, who hasn't been seen since the attack on his father's, the previous leader's house. So I think he is the one who is trying to going there. We haven't heard the team has left Tehran or arrived in Pakistan, but I think even the tweet he tweeted just hours ago, it seems he's trying to project power in the same time, sending a message to Iran's proxies and allies in the region that Iran will not abandon them. That's why he said under two conditions they will begin negotiation. They didn't say they don't go to Pakistan. They said under those conditions they will begin the negotiation. It seems one, as Kerry said, it is about bringing Lebanon into the negotiation, and second is releasing Iranian asset which has been frozen by United States.
Jia, thank you so much. Let's delve into that sticking point that all of our correspondents are raising, and that is the conflict in Lebanon, where Israel says it's fighting the Iran-backed Hezbollah group, which has been launching rockets into northern Israel. Israel says it's killed more than 40 Hezbollah fighters and destroyed numerous military sites since the massive bombardment on Wednesday. That killed more than 300 people in Lebanon, a third of them women, children and the elderly. The Israeli attacks and evacuation orders have displaced more than 1 million people in Lebanon, and there are growing concerns about the humanitarian crisis as well. We've been speaking to some people in Beirut.
There is no substitute for family. Everything else can be replaced. For example, the house and other things can be replaced. But parents, children, or a wife are the most important thing. The real problem is the body and the soul. May God compensate us for our loss. Our country has done nothing, and it has no involvement in this war.
The loss of people can never be replaced, you know. But as for the stones and buildings, God can compensate for that. There is no problem. There is a pharmacy here that has been reduced to rubble, and thank God, what can we say? We have no power over this. This is how the situation is.
Let's take you to our Middle East correspondent, Hugo Bachega, who's been out and about in Beirut today, talking to people as well. Hugo, just bring us up to date on the latest situation in the Lebanese capital.
Yeah, Lucy, so we spent hours today with emergency teams still digging, searching through the rubble of a collapsed building in central Beirut, searching for 2 people who were still missing, and there was very little hope that anyone could be found alive. It was a day of intense Israeli airstrikes today, particularly in the south of the country, and the Lebanese authorities are saying that 13 state security personnel were killed in an Israeli airstrike in the city of Nabatea. This is one of the cities that have been hardest hit by Israel in this war, and this is one of the deadliest incidents involving state personnel in this conflict. And remember that the state here, the Lebanese government, is not party to this conflict. This is a war between Israel and Hezbollah, and there have been more attacks by Hezbollah against Israel. It's been a particularly violent day in terms of Hezbollah attacks as well. So no ceasefire here, no indications of any kind of de-escalation in this conflict, but obviously, as we've been discussing, there is the possibility of talks between Israeli and Lebanese officials after the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu yesterday announced that he had authorized Israeli talks with Lebanese officials. But here in Lebanon, the authorities are saying that no talks are going to happen if there is no ceasefire in this conflict. So a complicated situation here, and obviously the suffering of the families continues. So today the authorities urge the relatives of families who are still searching for their loved ones, for people who haven't identified some of the dead bodies in hospitals across the country, to give DNA samples to help in this identification process. And you can probably hear the very loud sound of Israeli drones flying over Beirut tonight. So the conflict continues, and for the people of Lebanon, there's no respite.
Hugo, thank you so much. Live to Jerusalem now, we can speak to the BBC's Joel Gunter, who is there. Joel, what's the reaction been from the Israeli government about all the pressure around a ceasefire and their military campaign in Lebanon? Are they sensing that their actions could overshadow or even perhaps bring an end to these negotiations in Pakistan?
Well, Israeli officials here, including the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, have made it abundantly clear over the past couple of days that they do not see a ceasefire with Hezbollah as part of this offer for direct talks. And as if to underscore that, Israeli strikes are continuing across the south of Lebanon, as you've heard, following that tragic day of strikes a couple of days ago. It is hard to see Israel agreeing at this point to forego those strikes, to remove its forces from the south of Lebanon. So there is clearly an impasse. What Prime Minister Netanyahu essentially is saying is, I'm open to direct talks, but Israel is going to continue bombing in the meantime as it sees fit. And the Lebanese officials, understandably, don't see that as a good foundation for talks. And as you've just heard, they are saying that without a ceasefire, they won't go forward. There is, of course, the thorny issue of the fact that it is Hezbollah that Israel is fighting with, and officials from Hezbollah have said that they flatly reject the idea of the talks until there is a ceasefire. So we have an impasse there that, of course, does threaten to overshadow these talks between the US and Iran. It has already given the impression that it is possibly going to derail those talks if an agreement can't be reached. There is, of course, the possibility that President Trump will put pressure on Israel. We have the sense that he's already done that, resulting in this offer yesterday from Netanyahu to open these talks. And if the situation in Lebanon continues to overshadow the talks in Islamabad, and President Trump does want a quick exit from this war, and he does want those talks to succeed, we may see an increase, we may see yet more pressure from the Americans on Israel for some sort of resolution of the situation in Lebanon.
Joel, thank you so much. Well, let's turn now to the economic fallout of the war. President Trump accusing Iran of extortion by effectively closing off the Strait of Hormuz. The slowdown of ships passing through that narrow waterway between Iran and Oman has hit global supplies not just of oil and gas, but also of jet fuel and fertilizer, vital raw materials as well for manufacturing. The US has made reopening the waterway a key condition of the Pakistan-brokered ceasefire, but reports from inside Iran suggest its plans to actually tighten its grip on the strait, deciding who gets to pass through and also charging for the privilege. Only a handful of vessels have passed through the strait since the two-week ceasefire was announced, as you can see here. One reason is the risk of ships being attacked or even hitting a mine. A global shipping firm has told the BBC it's not prepared to take the risk.
One of the key questions is how secure is the passing? If it's not 100% secure, we wouldn't even ask our captains to switch on their engines. If there is any danger, no insurance company will insure your ship, and we wouldn't go through the strait without an insurance, right? And insurance costs have quadrupled, or even more. We pay for an insurance now as much in a week as we pay normally for a year.
Inflation in the US has risen to its highest rate in nearly 2 years as costs of oil and other products has gone up. And in Europe, there are warnings that there will be jet fuel shortages in just 3 weeks if the Strait of Hormuz does not reopen. That's according to the trade body for the continent's airports. For more on how the war is continuing to shock the global economy, here's Mark Ashdown.
The economic impact of this conflict continues to be felt around the world. Continents like Asia and Africa so far have been hardest hit. Various countries have imposed all kinds of measures to try and conserve energy and keep a lid on fuel prices. We've seen rationing of petrol and diesel. We've seen fuel price caps in some places. Myanmar, for example, introduced alternate driving days, and many countries are encouraging people to either work from home or take an extra day holiday every week. Now, right now, the key pinch point remains that Strait of Hormuz, that tiny waterway between Oman and Iran, where 20% of the world's oil and gas passes through. We spoke to one shipping organisation today. They represent 60% of vessels of the world's oil tanker fleet. They tell us the threat level remains critical, so they are advising members not to sail through there unless it's absolutely necessary. They still believe they could come under attack, so they are hoping for that lasting ceasefire, in which case operations can get back to normal. This turmoil, of course, continuing to affect the price of oil. It's become an obsession over the past month or so. Brent crude, that benchmark, futures oil in effect, is trading at around $95 a barrel right now. Remember, it was about $60 a barrel before this conflict began. But of more significance, and not very widely reported, is the spot price for oil. If you want oil overnight, immediate deliveries, that price is trading at about $147 a barrel. We've not seen a spike like that since the 2008 financial crash, and it underlines the impact it's having. That means refineries in Asia and Europe are having to pay that to get oil right now, and the worry is that's going to feed through to inflation, the costs we all pay for food and household goods. We've had the US inflation figures out just today in the past few hours. That's jumped from 2.4% year on year in February to 3.3% in March, so you're seeing the impact there of this conflict, and that could mean higher prices of household fuel at the pumps, food and everyday household goods too. So the longer this conflict rumbles on without a lasting peace deal, the higher the cost on households across the world.
So let's turn back now to the bigger picture around the peace talks in Pakistan, because with rising petrol prices in the US, the looming midterm elections in November, of course, President Trump will be looking for a way to end the war. In Iran, the regime has its own reasons to end the war. Iran suffering massive damage with a painful human impact. Many cities have come to an economic standstill. But the declared positions of the two sides are as far apart as it is possible to be. So let's speak live now to our diplomatic correspondent, Caroline Hawley, who joins us. Caroline, just take us through the main obstacles to a diplomatic path out of this war.
Well, I think the first big hurdle is actually getting two delegations into the Pakistani capital, Islamabad, to talk in some form, directly or indirectly. So the American Vice President J.D. Vance is in the air at the moment. We don't know what's happened with the Iranian delegation. It is expected that it will be led by the parliamentary speaker, Mohammad Bakr Kalibaf. But we've not heard that for sure. We don't know where he is at the moment. We don't know how the Iranian delegation is going to arrive in Islamabad. There have been some reports, some suggestions that the Pakistanis may go and fetch them because they don't have planes to get to the Pakistani capital. And then the parliamentary speaker has said that there are preconditions for the talks. He said they can't sit down and negotiate before there is a ceasefire in Lebanon. And also he said that assets, Iranian assets that have been blocked should be unfrozen. I think those are worth billions of dollars. So this has been thrown in at the last minute. So I think the first hurdle will actually be getting the two sides to talk in some form. And then there are myriad issues to discuss. I mean, first and foremost, I suppose the nuclear issue, that is at the root of the conflict between Iran and Israel and the West. The Iranians want to continue enriching uranium. There's the question of the 400 kilograms of uranium that it has already enriched to close to weapons grade, and where is that now? It's believed to lie under the rubble, and there have been suggestions. I think Donald Trump suggested that the Americans could help unearth it. But so the fate of Iran's nuclear program, then what about its missile production? Israel and the US have always said that they don't want Iran to have any long-range missiles. They have hit hard at the missile production facilities and storage facilities, but Iran is still able to fire both missiles and drones. And then crucially, the Strait of Hormuz, what will happen with that? And I think that on what happens there will lie the success or otherwise of the talks, if they go ahead at all. And I think at this stage we have to say if. I think there are high stakes for everyone involved, and certainly the Americans are very, very keen to have the talks. And as I said, J.D. Vance in the air at the moment. But with these conditions that the Iranians have set, who knows? And the Pakistanis are remaining very tight-lipped about what's going to happen, where the talks are taking place, and what's happened to the Iranian delegation.
Yeah, it's good that you've injected that cautionary note there, Caroline, and outlined the massive stakes here, because what are the risks, briefly, if they can't reach a deal and the war drags on?
Well, it's a risk to life and limb, isn't it? You spoke about the human cost, the many dead and injured in Iran, the massive destruction to Iranian infrastructure, including civilian infrastructure. Then if Iran carries on firing at the Gulf, damage to the Gulf economies. And then with Iran, if it still holds this stranglehold on the Strait of Hormuz, that has implications for the entire global economy. So everyone will be watching very, very closely what happens in Pakistan over the hours ahead.
We will be indeed, and we have a big team in Islamabad covering every development in Pakistan for our viewers over the next couple of days as well. Caroline Hawley, our diplomatic correspondent, thank you so much for joining us. So much at stake, as Caroline said. Whether you're joining us on YouTube, TikTok, Sounds, radio or TV, thanks for your time. We'll be back at the same time tomorrow with the Iran War Today.